I've got some expectations for Battlefield 5 in the year 2019. I've made a list today of some of the things I'd like to see coming to the game in the next 12 months or so. We've had a lot of content and additions come to the game already since it launched. The Tides of War have delivered some new weapons, a new map, practice range, single-player war story, The Last Tiger, and we know we're going to be getting more weapons, new game modes, new locations, maps, and armies soon as well. But what else should Battlefield 5 really be getting? Let's start off this list then with the big boy, the rental server program, or you might have heard some people calling it RSP. Since Battlefield 5 launched, we've not heard a peep from the dev team or EA about their plans to, or not to as it might be, bring rental servers to Battlefield 5. Now, regardless of the team's current position on it or what their plans might be for this feature, I fundamentally believe that Battlefield games grow and succeed when the community is allowed to curate their own experiences and create their own spaces within the game. Battlefield 3 and 4 showcase this perfectly, with smaller communities remaining playing those games still to this day, despite 3 more Battlefield titles having been released since then. The direction of Battlefield 5 right now is clearly matchmaking, funneling players into playlists set up by the dev team, playlists they believe the community wants to play. The problem is, not every player of Battlefield 5 likes every single map on Conquest, and they might want to create their own rotation. Not every player wants to see tanks on the Rotterdam map, and would rather those were removed and the map was focused purely on infantry gameplay. Not every player wants to play as an infantry soldier, and would like to spend more time in planes. Rented servers, with the right tools, those could solve these issues, and they could offer the community, or certain sections of it, a way to create their own flavour of Battlefield 5. And knowing they're renting a server to support that flavour, they're more likely going to come back to the game time and again to an experience they know they're going to enjoy. Looking back to previous games in the franchise, like Battlefield 3 and Battlefield 4, I noticed some gaps here in Battlefield 5 that currently aren't being filled. We don't have many 24/7 servers of our favourite maps. In fact, we don't have any of those because we can't rent our own servers to create them. We're lacking rotations of heavy vehicle-focused maps. We're lacking pistol-only servers. In that case, we're lacking quite a lot of variety, in my opinion. As I've said, right now DICE and EA have kept their lips very much sealed on plans for rented servers, minus a few mentions on social media, and those really only amount to, when we're ready, we'll talk about it, but I'm seeing a lot of rumblings in the community, players growing tired of that response. Now, in my opinion, rental servers are a core fundamental part of the Battlefield offering, and support for them really should have been included at the launch of the game. If I'm to take a look back, Battlefield 3, that was the game that showed me what the effect of a rented server could do to the game experience. I'll just point out, Noshar Kanal's TDM. I pumped about 850 hours into Battlefield 3 back in the day, and I can say with confidence that at least 200 hours of that was playing on rented, community-run Noshar Kanal's TDM 24/7 servers. Those servers were responsible for my AEK being the highest ranked gun that I used in Battlefield 3, and it made me fall in love with the infantry gameplay that Battlefield 3 offered within the Battlefield franchise. That very specific experience, one map, one mode, that kept me coming back over and over again, because it was an experience that I enjoyed and one that I wanted to have almost all of the time. Battlefield 5 needs rented servers, and support for them on the level of Battlefield 3 and 4, where any member of the community can rent a server and create the experience that they want. The game needs this, rather than only the funneled, curated, narrow experience that DICE has launched with all the matchmaking playlists. I think we need freedom to create our own variations and experiences as well. DICE, if you are listening, just let us know what you're planning. Let us know what you're looking to do, and I can promise you that the community who are waiting for that information, myself included, who want rented servers for this game, they will rally around you and they will support you with it. If you leave it much later, I think you're going to have the same issue that you had in Battlefield 1, that clans and communities will leave the game for good because the tools they like to have simply aren't there for them to use. The second thing on my list for Battlefield in 2019, I'd like to see a complete overhaul of the front-end menu system and tweaks to the in-game UI. I don't think it's any secret that certain sections of the community aren't fans of the current implementation that DICE has for the menus. Things are just all over the place. In general, it does seem like style has been chosen as the main driver here, rather than function. You've got the armory, the company, your Tides of War progression screen, your Tides of War challenges tile, and your profile, all in separate places within the menu system, yet they're all linked in some way. They all have elements of progression included in them. The Tides of War progression screen being tucked away in the top right hand corner of the main menu honestly feels like placeholder, and no one could really figure out where they wanted to put it. The profile, with all of its sideways scrolling, just makes horrible use of the space that's available. The change appearance and change character options within your company, I really feel they need to be combined because they're both linked to soldier customization, yet for some reason have different sub-menus. The apply all weapon skin button that was supposed to be added with the December update, that didn't arrive. The armory, with its sideways scrolling again, hiding sale items away from players' eyes, I think it's just more natural to enable vertical scrolling and let players do that instead. Then we've got the shipments tab. I don't really understand why it exists. I don't understand why the game can't just add items to my inventory automatically when I've unlocked them. It feels like I'm being forced to enter a menu to collect things that I've already unlocked. Seems like a totally unnecessary step that only serves to put eyeballs on the fact the game gives you a lot of things to unlock. It could be a good thing for some players, but I would argue most players are always working towards unlocking something, and so the game just needs to do a better job whilst you're playing the game of letting you know you've unlocked something. And finally, the assignments menu. This one really does baffle me. Why was the decision taken to add little orange circles to everything to show your progression and not simply use numbers? Some assignments ask you to do like 6,000 damage or something with certain weapons. How is a numberless orange circle going to help me know how much more damage I need to do? For me, it would just be way simpler to use numbers. It's clearer communication and it's better for the player. That's why I said style appears to have been chosen as the main driver rather than function. To me, the front-end menu system is not a great user experience, and it should be, because every time you launch the game, that's what you're presented with. And sometimes I'm just left frustrated, confused, and frankly quite baffled about some of the decisions that have been taken. And then we've got the in-game UI. I've got some issues with it now that I've been playing the game solidly for about 100 hours, things that you don't quite notice when you first start playing the game. Battlefield 5 moved the health bar from the ammo counter in the bottom right and put it in the bottom middle of the screen. That's a vital element now in a different place to another vital element. So I have to look in more places to get the info I need, and I have to spend more time not looking at the center of my screen, watching out for dangers. We've also got the gigantic game scoring mode item in the top middle of the screen, and then the minimap with a tiny compass on it in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. In total, 4 different places to look in order to get the information you used to be able to get by looking in just 2 different places. If you go back to Battlefield 4, that had a combined ammo and health item in the bottom right, a combined game mode and minimap item in the bottom left, and there was a radial compass around the outside of the minimap as well to give you extra information if you needed it. Battlefield 4 was displaying concise information in 2 different locations, whereas in Battlefield 5, we've got the same vital information spread out across 4 different locations. That seems like a step back in my opinion. To resolve this step backwards, I'd like to see DICE move that game mode widget and stick it back on top of the minimap, massively reducing HUD clutter. I'd like to see them add the health bar back on top of the ammo item in the bottom right, reducing the number of places you have to look to get vital information, and I'd like to see them implement a ribbon compass right across the top of the screen, which would not only make the compass a lot more useful than it currently is, but it would help reduce frustrations trying to identify enemies at range, since you could easily call out compass directions to your friends on comms. Sounds like a reach to say it could help solve visibility issues. DICE does have a lot to do in that area as well, but it could at least give players a better way of communicating and calling out the general area that an enemy could be hidden in. Number 3 on my list, I'd like to see a complete scale back and rework of Grand Operations. Battlefield 5's attempt to build on the success of operations from Battlefield 1 has largely been met with disappointment from the community, and personally, I'm confused as to how the mode, in the state it's in, was actually measured as an improvement over what Battlefield 1 offered. Grand Operations to me is just a disjointed mess. Often, I see players quitting after day 2, thinking the entire operation is over. That highlights how poor the messaging is to players about what they're actually taking part in. I don't feel any drama, I don't feel any theatre. I don't really think there's any atmosphere. It's really, really bland. There's nothing really gelling the days together. Airborne is not a particularly impressive game mode, 64-man frontlines doesn't have enough flag points, and the match often ends up finishing before it gets going, and I'm still yet to play more than one match of Final Stand. That's what DICE heavily touted as a tense finish to a grand operation if teams are closely matched. The fact that days 1 and 2 don't matter in deciding the outcome of a grand operation is just a huge oversight in the design of the mode, and it feels like a decision taken to artificially lengthen the game mode, which in my opinion didn't need to be any longer than what it was in Battlefield 1 anyway. The lack of cinematic cutscenes that Battlefield 1 used means that any tension that might have built up between days is just lost. The white text on black background looks more like a placeholder than a finished element and feels like an absolute downgrade over the Battlefield 1 experience. In fact, the only segment of Grand Operations that I actually like right now is Breakthrough, which in itself is a downgrade of the operations experience that it was in Battlefield 1. At least in Breakthrough, you get some sense of forward momentum and some sense of progression that you're moving through and achieving something. In Battlefield 1, DICE made changes to the rush game mode that were needless and ruined the game mode. In Battlefield 5, DICE has made changes to operations in order to produce grand operations, and I feel like they've now ruined that as well. Sometimes, things don't need to change. Operations in Battlefield 1 was groundbreaking enough. It was one of the best new entries to the franchise in a long, long time. Why DICE felt the need to change things so soon after introducing it is beyond me. Change for the sake of change, or simply a mistake? I'm not sure. But a rollback to the Battlefield 1 implementation, incorporating those thematic links between days, and reinstating Breakthrough as pretty much the sole game mode outside of Final Stand at the end, I think that would be a really good implementation, and we know it's possible. Before launch, DICE said that Grand Operations was very modular, and that they could change game modes and maps pretty much on the fly. I'd recommend DICE give that a go, and try some different formats for the game mode, because right now it's just nowhere near enjoyable to play. The fourth thing on my list was actually taken from one of my Twitter followers called Matt. He suggested World War II's greatest hits. I think DICE's approach to Battlefield 1, using the mantra of unseen, untold, unplayed battles, worked better because, in general, the current gamer population didn't know too much about World War I. Whatever they were playing was ultimately new and fresh to them. But with Battlefield 5, using that same mantra hasn't quite hit the same spot. I think players were expecting more iconic, well-known battles and locations to be on offer in Battlefield 5 from the get-go. The Normandy beach landings, the battles in Stalingrad, Midway, and others. Things players will look at and instantly recognise. Without those on offer at launch, I think that put a lot of players off and led them to not buy the game. I think 2019 needs to be chock full of iconic World War II content from the first few years of the conflict to bring that feeling of World War II to Battlefield 5. Matt on Twitter eloquently put it that if Battlefield 5 was Forza, you'd be driving around in lesser known brands of cars like Morgan, Reliant and Austin, rather than the cars that you know from Ferrari, Lamborghini and Porsche. Who'd buy a Forza game where you couldn't drive Ferraris? He does make a very good point. And fifth and finally on my list today is proper Platoon integration and support for communities within the game environment. Battlefield 5 does have some elements of Platoon support right now, carried over from Battlefield 1, but the ability to actually manage platoons and your presence in them is not available at the moment. And Battlefield 5 is not present within the companion app, which means you can't control platoons from there either. Crucially, at the very least, the game needs to have parity with Battlefield 1 with regards to platoons in 2019, and I hope much more besides. I'd like to see leaderboards within the platoon that show the position of it compared to others, ones that your friends are part of, and perhaps even a message board where members could leave notes for others. Ranks within platoons that could be given out or achieved by playing the game with different platoon members. And I really hope that we see the hard limit of 100 platoon members removed or extended to a much higher amount. Platoon support goes hand in hand with rental server support as well, and would really help when it comes to organising what servers the platoon members are using, and perhaps if they are rented servers active, rented by platoon members, those could appear in a list when viewing the platoon page. Now, there are lots and lots of other things that I could have mentioned in this list, but these are the ones that came to mind almost instantly. If you have any of your own suggestions, leave them below in the comments, because the more opinions that are out there, the more information DICE has to use when making decisions about future content and updates. But a big thank you for watching today. I'm sure 2019 is going to be a good year for Battlefield 5, and a big thanks for sticking with my channel for the ride. But until next time, my name is Westie, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.